I got a message from my dad one day asking whether I would want the PC. The exciting part is this: the hard part had been done. The only way I could think of is trying to get this display up, and by doing so is try to get a new old GPU that has HDMI port that is compatible. Just when I got very excited that we were almost there, at least I was fairly certain about it, I was bamboozled by some suspicions that I kinda overlooked. So after I ordered the new GPU, I went back to reinvestigate again because I suddenly realized that there were 2 points that I missed out on. Now, if you haven't watched the previous video, you can find this video in my channel to watch it first. In that video, I explained what the PC is and what the parts are and the how and what and why I ended up ordering a new GPU for it. And for those of you who are new, you are watching Dead by Craft. Alright, previously I was fairly certain that it was the GPU's HDMI compatibility issue that caused it to not be able to show some displays. At least I had tried to narrow it down to that point. I mean, how not to? I had tried to use a HDMI to VGA converter on the motherboard, but it didn't work. So I decided to use HDMI port directly instead, while the GPU seems to be receiving power. The RAM sticks were also receiving power and the motherboard behaves correctly, especially with the error code. The beeps, yeah, I was pretty convinced that the compatibility may be the issue. After all, it has been decades and my monitor is a 2024 monitor, so that is a plausible reason, right? However, while I was waiting for the new GPU to come, I kept thinking about why the fans kept on spinning and stopping and spinning and stopping repeatedly for all three fans, from PSU fan to CPU fan to GPU fan even. It got to a point that I actually disassembled the MSI GPU to clean it up and then reassemble it again, make sure everything is fine, thinking that, you know, maybe it helped, right? But it didn't. Anyway, this is the new GPU that I ordered, an Asus GT1030 silent low profile version with 2GB RAM, DDR5 SDRAM. So why this GPU then? It is the high end for the era, that I can reuse it if it doesn't work with the motherboard. So afterwards, I decided to try all the components with the new GPU. The first thing I noticed was the power drawn. When we used the MSI GPU, it drew about 57 to 58 watts, but with this new GPU, it drew about 60 to 61 watts. This is actually good because it shows that the GPU is supposed to be working because there's no spike, nothing but a consistent power drawn. The higher wattage is probably due to the newer tech as compared to the MSI GPU. But here's the thing. The spinning and stopping pattern is still persisting. This is when I was thinking, could it be the new GPU was faulty? But of course I was in denial about it because after all it's new, and I started to think whether the HDMI cable is having the issue instead. So I tried with a new HDMI cable that I happen to have one lying around, and it still didn't work. This is when I became unsure, but it also near impossible to have both old and new GPU not working, and then the VGA port for the motherboard to be also not working, and then my new HDMI to be faulty as well, which is like, what? You have all these new components and yet it's still not working, right? Like something is wrong there. And you know why I was in denial? Because I mean, even though if it's just GT1030, it was still not super cheap because it's not secondhand. And to have two new things to be faulty, now that's concerning. To the point where it's just, you know, it just doesn't make sense to have two new things not working at the same time, right? It just doesn't make sense. So then it suddenly occurred to me, you know, could it be that the PSU is having an issue all along, but we did an isolated test initially with a paperclip and the fan was running just fine. It was consistent. There was no stopping at all. This narrowed it down to the motherboard. Now, we know that we will change the PSU because it is more than a decade old and has not been used for close to a decade. So it is risky after all, but the motherboard, we did plan to reuse it because we were so sure that the motherboard was actually working fine. But because of this now, we have to suspect it. It is a suspect now because after all these components are plugged into the motherboard, and the motherboard is like the main brain here that kinda, you get this power, and then I'll collect everything, and then the BIOS will boot up, right? But the thing is that HDMI not working, even though I've used new HDMI cable, new GPU not working, old GPU not working, and then, I don't know, even though they all show that they are receiving power, right? So what's the issue here? So we gotta bring it back to the suspect list, right? So what I did next was to order a new motherboard from eBay instead. That's right, guys, eBay. Because I couldn't find this anywhere. Okay, for those of you who don't know, in Singapore, we have this platform called Carousel where retailers actually sell their secondhand stuff. It's very hard to find, and usually it may not be as trustworthy as eBay because some of them, they just sold it directly and they may not be listing the description correctly. So that's when I decided to go to eBay, and true enough, there were more than enough sellers out there. And the one that I got from, he is actually a legit so-called refurbishing shop, and he has stocks for this. So I ended up ordering from eBay. And another thing is that my theory for this now has completely changed 180 degrees. Now, I actually trust that all the components are actually working fine, except the motherboard. Now, I've thought that at this point, I was thinking that, okay, maybe the motherboard is the faulty one because, all the components kind of depend on the motherboard, right? So that's why. And that said, this is why I ordered it. An Asus ATX motherboard P8Z77VLX that has 1155 pin socket and uses DDR3 RAM. This one is supposed to be the better motherboard for that era. It has integrated graphics capability and also the capability to overclock. Unfortunately for our used CPU, it is not clockable. So this motherboard then, it arrived with a dented box. Now, for such secondhand stuff that you purchase from eBay, especially it's a refurbished, if they did, a lot of the times there were no longer boxes. So basically, I can imagine that they just salvage it from whatever old PC, and then they just try to clean it up, you know what I mean, and test and make sure it's working. So they have to come with their own boxes and their own paddings inside so that, trying to prevent anything happening to the motherboard. And holy moly, it came with a dented box. Oh, you have no idea how scared I was because I only purchased one. So yeah, I was really worried about it. Even though before sending, the seller was kind enough to test it and then upgraded the BIOS to the latest one, which is 2014 BIOS version. I did ask the seller to help me to do all this checking and then send me the screenshots, and they did. So I know it may not be the cleanest motherboard ever, that I actually had to clean it myself again. But hey, it works, and the seller tried to clean it from the look of it. And speaking of dented box, we actually ordered a new PSU for it. My new PSU that I ordered, yeah, it also came with a dented box, which is unbelievable because this one is new from Amazon. But oh well, at least the packaging is much better, so I trust in it. And yeah, for those of you who are asking why I ordered a new one, because I actually thought that, it maybe can be reused again for another project in case I decided not to use this one for this motherboard, right? After all, it is a Thermaltake GF1 fully modular ATX 850 watt power supply with 80 plus gold stamp. That's right, it's really quiet, which is amazing, and 850 watt is more than enough for such motherboard, for such system. And of course, a minimally gold stamp. Yeah, I'm very particular about it, so gold stamp is a minimal for me. So as you can see, Only the motherboard and the PSU are replaced, while we reused the rest of the components. Started with the CPU. I applied the CPU and forgot that it was actually a second hand, so I was actually panicking a bit as to why the CPU cover didn't pop out by itself, because when you apply, after you slot in your CPU and then you apply the thing, the plastic cover will actually pop out by itself, usually, but this one didn't. I had to remove it by myself. Of course, the jiggling is a must when fixing in the CPU. Then, don't forget to apply the thermal paste which I used the same one as the one in the first part of the video. Then I assembled the CPU fan and then the RAM. At this point, I was able to assemble faster because I really learned a lot during my first PC build. I think the main hurdle was to recognize which pin slot is for which one, for which cable, because for the motherboard, in the motherboard world, they all have their own labeling like F panel, USB, etc, etc. Next, hook them up with the PSU because we need power to power the motherboard and the CPU. Then I turned it on, saw the motherboard's green light lit up, and yo, this one is so sick because for the MSI motherboard, it didn't have any LED light at all, but in this motherboard, there is this green light. So you know that if the LED light is not lighting up, something is not right, because from all the testing, the LED light will always light up first. So that's pretty sick. But then, as I was checking, I spotted that there is no CMOS battery. I totally forgot about it. So I slotted one in and did a final check. Next is hooking them up to a monitor, which is the moment of truth. At this point, I decided to use the integrated graphics first instead of the GPU because after all, the seller had helped us to test and it was able to display. Although, at this point, I actually didn't realize that if you look at the picture closely, the seller was actually using a GPU to hook it up to a monitor. I totally overlooked it. And I continued by thinking that, okay, our motherboard has this capability and our CPU has the integrated graphics capability as well. So yeah, let's just hook it up. And oh my god, guys, speaking of monitor, look at this. I managed to get a VGA monitor for free because my workplace was going to recycle it as they plan to use HDMI monitors for now. Unfortunately, out of the few that they have, only one was still working. Yes, I tested all of them, all the VGA monitors, because I was thinking that maybe I can get more than one back, right? I mean, there's no harm. After all, a lot of the older motherboards, they do still use VGA cable. So yeah, VGA monitor is pretty important. Unfortunately, only one was still working. Nonetheless, I was really happy because finally we can test with the monitor from that era. That's right. So I plugged the VGA cable, connect them all together, and bam, the monitor lit up. At this point, I was really happy because this really solves the puzzle. It was the motherboard after all. But of course, to be more sure, we have to test the parts one by one. I started with the GPUs first, which is the MSI GPU. It is beautiful, I tell you. All the fans are spinning. The monitor shows it draws a consistent 48.7 watts. Our old MSI GPU still works. This is perfect because GPU is never cheap. So whatever working GPU that you have, I guess at this point, I'll just keep it for future projects. Next, the new GPU that has been giving me anxiety. No fan for the GPU, but its silence is beauty. But this GPU only has HDMI and DVI ports, so we test with the HDMI port instead. Because what came with the monitor wasn't just the monitor and VGA cable, but also a VGA HDMI converter. Yes, I got it for free, guys, from my workplace as well. And this was tested too before I took it back from my workplace. After all, our PC system and laptops, they use HDMI port. So I know that the monitor, the VGA cable, and the HDMI adapter are all working. And lo and behold, the monitor shows beautifully and it draws a consistent 51.6 watt. Now again, it is probably because it uses new tech architecture, so naturally it draws more power at idle, but at full loads, the power management is more efficient supposedly for the GT 1030 as compared to the old MSI GPU. Now at this point, I was already ready to call it a day because both GPUs worked, right? But what about each RAM? We gotta test all components, right? Now that we know our motherboard is working, everything is fine, so we gotta continue testing each component. This means we gotta test our RAM sticks. We have two different RAM sticks at this point. One with 4GB and the other one with 8GB. So I tested with both of them plugged in at first, and the system drew about 40 watts, no beeps, nothing, but there was also no display at all. Now I know that a mismatched RAM sticks doesn't work here because I did try with all these mismatched RAMs before with my laptops, and you know, you still gotta try because sometimes your motherboard treat this situation differently. Some will show the display but with maybe capped RAM capacity, some will not show at all, like in this case. So that's when I tested with only an 8GB RAM stick first, and it works. 40 watt with display and no beep. Next, testing with 4GB RAM stick with about 41 watt drawn and display with no beep. At this point, our work is done because the PC is nearly there. The faulty part has been identified to be the motherboard. The rest of the old parts are still working. But I did say nearly. So what's left? The HDD. That's right, this old PC from my family came with a hard drive, a 2TB Seagate HDD. If you haven't, you can watch the first part of this video. Just look for this. Alright, so I hooked the HDD up and boot the PC up again. I waited and then this shows. Oh boy guys, you have no idea how happy I was when I saw this logo. I continued to wait, you know, because it's Windows, it's not Linux. It takes a while to boot up, especially the older version. And you know, I don't know how cluttered this HDD is because it's old. It may not be, you know, the stuff may have not been cleaned up properly, may not be partitioned properly, may not be defragmented properly. Who knows, right? It's been so old, and a lot of the stuff that I pried up, they still have the warranty stickers on it. Don't forget about that. So yeah, definitely, it was as how it is when it first, you know, when my family first got it new, probably, right? But again, we gotta see until the end before we can call it a huge success. Because after all, if there is a Windows logo, that means the OS is still inside. The HDD is still working. We should be able to use it immediately, right? And yes, I was greeted with this, the login screen. Let me tell you guys, I've never been this happy looking at a Windows login screen. Unfortunately, this also means that the HDD has not been formatted and there is potentially still data inside because the account name is actually still my brother's account name. I know about it, but this is where we stop. After all, we can say that we have succeeded in reviving this 14-year-old PC. We have reached our goal of troubleshooting the PC. We have tested the parts to still be working. We had replaced the PSU with the new Thermaltake PSU because it's just risky to use the old one. And we had identified the initial issue that my dad first told me about, which is the PC wasn't working, aka it wasn't able to boot up. The main issue was the old MSI H77MA G43 motherboard being faulty. After replacing it with the second-hand Asus motherboard, it works beautifully. Man, what a journey. Not only I learned a lot, but I had been fulfilling my dream of building PC and troubleshooting, although I have to say that I'm still an amateur at this point. So what's next then? This is where I need your help, guys. What do you think we should use this for? Initially, I've thought of planning to use this as part of my NAS build, but I had managed to get some parts for it. So This one has become an extra, so I need your help to decide. What do you think we should use this one for now that it works? Now that we have successfully revived it. Please leave your comments down below as I will definitely read them. I'm really looking forward to it. With that, if you like this video, do consider liking and subscribing to this channel as the journey continues. It doesn't end here. Stay tuned. Thank you again for watching this video. I will see you on the next one. Bye bye.